Here is a second generation Škoda Roomster being tested in 2015. Škoda is just putting its finishing touches on the car when it is then cancelled by Volkswagen. Despite being production ready, it will not reach dealerships and nobody will get to buy one. This is a car that was cancelled before production. Usually it's a sad thing when this happens. The hard work of hundreds, if not thousands of people is, essentially, flushed down the toilet. Obviously the reason why this happens though, money. Everybody likes having money, especially car companies. So despite having spent millions on developing a new car, car makers can be certain that they'll lose even more money when trying to sell something which nobody wants. But anyways, I'm glad that the second gen Roomster didn't make it. Look at the original one. Those quirky leaf-shaped windows are like nothing else you'd see on an ordinary family MPV. Now look at the thing that was supposed to replace it. It's a van. It's a Volkswagen Caddy van with a green badge at the front. Also, a funny thing with this is that the original Roomster came out in 2006. Good for him. But its replacement, which was to be released in 2015, was based on the third gen Volkswagen Caddy, which came out in 2004. So technically the 2015 Roomster was going to be based on an older platform than the car it was supposed to replace. Anyway, let's talk about Hyundai. They've been trying to position themselves upmarket for a while now as an alternative to the cheaper Kia brand. And this upmarket push could really be seen during the 2000s with cars like the Veracruz, which was positioned to go right up against the Lexus RX. Now that's not a cheap car. So at this time, Hyundai also looked at the Mercedes R-Class and thought that's a market segment they need to be in. So while the Portico concept made its debut in 2005, the production version was slated for a 2010 release. So what went wrong? Number 1. Focus groups did not like this car. Hyundai found out that their customers did not want to buy this elongated crossover. Which makes sense, nobody wanted to buy the R-Class either. Number 2. The financial crisis. People weren't buying crossovers anyways, they wanted smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. Number 3. Hyundai is not a luxury brand. That much should be obvious. So the Portico was killed mere weeks before it was supposed to make its debut. Meanwhile, Pontiac's G8 sport truck was actually officially announced and we've got plenty of actual proof of it. But alas, it was a victim of Pontiac getting killed off and never actually made it to production. Japan's bubble era can be thanked for giving us some truly exciting and once-in-a-lifetime cars, for example the mid-engined Honda NSX. Although Nissan nearly beat them to the punch with first the 1985 Mid4 and later the 87 Mid4 II. Despite being billed as concept cars, they were essentially ready to go to production. Nissan did indeed have plans for that and continued the research and development for the Mid4 for years after they had been unveiled. So what happened? It would have probably been too expensive. Japan's economy crashed in 1992. I don't know. The engine from the Mid4 eventually did make its way into the 300 ZX, so perhaps Nissan was just afraid they'd compete with their own car. Now let's quickly have a look at some versions of existing cars that didn't make it, starting with the 86 Taurus. Everybody knows its flush front end with the Ford badge encased in an oval grille. But have a look at this. Initially, the Taurus L trim was to have a more conventional slotted grille, although it was completely unnecessary as the engine already got all the cooling it needed. This design was eventually scrapped before production and all Tauruses launched with the oval grille. Regardless, this pre-production version did make it into the 86 brochures and even this Motor Week road test.
While the standard Taurus L has a tempo-like grille, the GL and LX have this more controversial split oval opening.
Unlike its predecessor, the GMT 800 platform Chevy Tahoe was not sold as a two-door SUV, only a four-door. But that's not to say that Chevrolet did not consider a two-door version. They very much did. Here's a prototype testing. But nobody bought two-door SUVs at this point. Ford had gotten rid of the Bronco by then, and Dodge was selling the Ram Charger in Mexico only. So the Chevy did not make it. Here is one of the prototypes in 2004, about 30 minutes before it was scrapped. Volvo produced this 263 prototype, a hatchback version of the 200, but it stayed a prototype. More well known for their hatchbacks is Saab, and for the final 9.5, Saab was planning on producing more variants of it than just the sedan and wagon that we got. Indeed, a hatchback variant was spotted testing and was most likely very close to being produced, but it's said that GM was afraid it would cannibalize sales from the Opel Insignia hatchback, which rode on the same platform. Well, it's a good thing that didn't happen and that Opel is alive and well to this day. And while Volkswagen was caught testing a hatchback variant of the B3 Passat, it did not make it into production, which is a little surprising as the design of the B3 was quite obviously influenced greatly by the Auto 2000 concept, which was a hatchback. That's that. Now here's the Dodge Lancer. It's a Mitsubishi Lancer but with a Dodge grille, and on the back it's badged as the Dodge Caliber, which is actually this thing. Yeah, I'll explain that. I can't, so I'm gonna move on. Not all cars are privileged enough to even receive a good enough prototype that's tested on public roads. Often new models can be binned in their development stages, and all that we have to go off of are renders by artists and their interpretation on what the car could have looked like. Such is the case with the Peugeot 608, which was rumored to make its debut around 2017 as the successor to the 607. But once you look at the 607 sales numbers, you understand why this 608 never arrived. BMW wanted to expand their Roadster lineup and was working on a Z2 to fit below the Z4, the caveat being this was to be front-wheel drive. So not only did they want to expand their Roadster offerings, they also seemingly wanted to ease people into BMW launching multiple front-wheel drive cars. The first being the 2 Series Active Tourer. But the Z2 never joined it. Maybe because the Mini convertible exists. On the other side of the spectrum, the Lancia Flavia sedan was unveiled, people got to see it with their own eyes, and even press kits were given out to journalists, and that's it. Only the convertible ever actually made it on sale, and even that was for 2 years, as the Flavia Cabriolet was the first car in history whose sales numbers were negative. China, despite having a relatively young car industry, has numerous examples of vehicles we've seen, but not on the roads. For example, 2005, Chery or Chery was very much in the process of expanding its small lineup, and one of these prospective new models was to be the B13 minivan. A pretty innocuous looking thing, so it would have probably forever flown under the radar if it weren't for the fact that after its 2005 debut, the next time anyone saw it again was 2008, when it made its debut. Again. The difference being that this time it was instead badged as a Chery Reach 5 instead. The name change didn't appear to change its fortunes because that didn't go on sale either. So they tried again as it made its debut. Again. As the Rely V8. I will now give 3 seconds to guess what happened next. Exactly, the Chinese army started building it by themselves. For themselves in 2013. Or the army story is simply a misinterpretation and the B13 truly never reached production. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I simply do not actually know which story is the correct one.
Do you want to be happy? Join the Corsicar membership program on YouTube today and receive exclusive content and the right to brag for decades to come. Tell your family, tell your friends, and join the Corsicar membership program on YouTube together to support your 57th favorite content creator. Just keep in mind, these cheap prices will last forever.